I am Lucas Neville, an architect living in a small Scandinavian town. I have been married to my wife Isabella for 10 years now, and we have two lovely children, our 7-year-old son Henry and our 5-year-old daughter Monica. For many years, I thought our family life was perfect. We lived in a comfortable house in a quiet neighborhood surrounded by lush trees and a neatly manicured lawn. Every evening when I come home from work, Isabella greets me with a warm smile, and the kids run to hug me with excitement. As a family, we love to spend our free time together. Friday movie nights are a tradition where we curl up on the couch and watch Isabella's hand-picked family comedy or adventure movie. On weekends, we often have barbecue parties in the backyard and invite the neighbors over to share a meal and a laugh. Other times, we play board games at the dining room table or go to the neighborhood park for picnics and kite flying. In front of the children, Isabella and I always acted like we were in love. We held hands, hugged, and exchanged intimate glances. We want to give Henry and Monica a home full of love and warmth so that they can feel the deep bond between their parents. We also strive to create a stable and harmonious family environment so that our children can grow up healthy and happy. However, just when I thought our marriage and family life had reached a point of perfection, things began to change. It was a seemingly normal Friday night when Isabella's behavior caused me to feel a twinge of unease and confusion. This feeling, like a tiny grain of sand, fell into the calm surface of the lake in my heart and caused ripples. It was a normal Friday night, and as usual, I left work early to spend the weekend with my family. When I opened the door, I was greeted by the cheerful voices of Isabella and the children, but today, I was greeted by silence. I looked around. The living room was empty, and there was no sign of food on the table. This was unusual for Isabella, who was always a hard worker. Usually at this time of the year, she would have prepared a sumptuous dinner for the family, and the table would be filled with aromatic dishes. The children come running to me excitedly and tell me all about their day. I tried to call Isabella's name, but there was no response. An inexplicable uneasiness began to grow in my heart. I took out my cell phone and dialed her number. The ringtone rang in the silent room, seemingly very harsh. 1, 2, 3 times. Eventually, the call went to voicemail. This has never happened before. Isabella's cell phone is always on 24 hours a day. She will also be the first time to answer my call. I sat on the couch and waited anxiously. The ticking of the clock seemed to be amplified indefinitely, and every second was as long as a century. Just as I was about to go crazy, the sound of a key turning came from the front door. Isabella walked in the door, but her outfit was very strange to me. She was wearing a bright red, low-cut, tight-fitting blouse with a sexy cleavage on her chest. I have never seen her wear this top, and her usual elegant turtleneck sweater style is very different. The lower body is a very short black hip skirt. The hemline can only barely cover the root of the thighs. Long legs are so exposed. This kind of dress, and Isabella usually always wear to the ankle-long skirt and pants, is not suitable for the late fall cold night out. Isabella seldom wears makeup on weekdays. At most she wears some light powder and lipstick. Tonight, however, her face was delicately painted with smoky makeup, and the corners of her eyes sparkled with seduction. Her red lips were so colorful that they were moist and glossy in the dim light of the foyer. Her long hair was not tied up simply as usual, but with a curling iron carefully ironed, hanging loosely on the shoulders, exuding a lazy charm of the atmosphere. "Hi, honey, you're back?" I played it cool, trying to ease my inner turmoil. "How was your night?" Isabella smiled perfunctorily, a hint of fatigue in her tone. "Just had a dinner with my colleagues and talked about some work matters. Nothing special." I noticed that she had neither a purse nor a shopping bag tonight. It reminded me of how often she had been coming home late lately, each time with the excuse that she was working late or shopping with friends, but never bringing anything back with her. "You look exhausted," I said as I stepped forward, wanting to give her a warm hug as usual and ease her fatigue with a kiss. But to my surprise, Isabella gently pushed me away, avoiding my embrace. "I'm sorry, honey. I'm really tired." Her eyes flickered and she didn't look me in the eye. "I'm going to take a shower and then I'm going to bed, okay?" Her tone was cold and detached, not at all gentle and considerate. After saying that, she hurried up the stairs, leaving me standing in the foyer, my heart full of confusion and loss. The sound of high heels hitting the wooden floor in the night seemed particularly harsh, like a sharp blade. One by one cut in my heart. I was frozen in place, my heart filled with confusion and disbelief. Isabella had never rejected my closeness in this way, and her detachment and indifference made me feel both hurt and confused. Is this woman in costume really my wife of 10 years? What secrets was she hiding? Since that unusual Friday night, Isabella's erratic behavior has been a thorn in my side. Her coldness and detachment, her deliberate concealment of her behavior, all lingered in my mind. I began to pay attention to her every move, hoping to find some clues, but afraid of the harm the truth might bring. In the following weeks, Isabella's behavior became more and more erratic. She began to work overtime on a regular basis, often going home late at night. Whenever I asked her about the reason for her overtime work, she would always say that it was a new project that needed to be rushed, or that her boss had given her an extra task. However, when I called her office during my lunch break, the receptionist told me that she was not in the office, and Isabella's explanations were always far-fetched and unnatural, which deepened my suspicions. In addition to frequent overtime work, Isabella began to travel frequently. She claimed that the company wanted to develop new markets and needed her to go abroad to study and negotiate business. At first, I understood her work needs. Gradually, however, I realized that her business trips became more and more frequent, sometimes even 2 or 3 times a month. Moreover, the destination of each trip was different. Sometimes it was a neighboring metropolis, sometimes it was a small town in the middle of nowhere. This kind of irregular business trip arrangement makes me feel more and more puzzled and confused. What concerned me even more was that Isabella began to do a lot of what she called shopping on weekends. Often, she would leave the house early on Saturday mornings and would not return until late in the evening, pacing tiredly. Strangely enough, she never came home with shopping bags and never seemed to actually buy anything. When I asked, she always smiled and excused herself by saying she went to the mall to relax or had afternoon tea with friends. But I always felt that she was intentionally avoiding my questions. I began to observe Isabella's every move, hoping to find some clues. I noticed that she was dressing more stylishly than before, and her makeup was much more sophisticated. Every morning, she spent twice as much time as usual on her grooming. I also noticed that she began to show an almost dependence on her cell phone. Whenever she received a message, she would immediately check and reply, but in front of me, she never opened the screen. All of these signs made the clouds of suspicion in my heart grow thicker and thicker. On several occasions, I tried to access Isabella's cell phone at home to check her call logs and text messages. But to my dismay, her cell phone always had a password and I couldn't log in. I even had the courage to open her private computer late at night when she was working late. However, the computer was also password protected, and all my attempts were in vain. Each failure made me more suspicious that Isabella was deliberately hiding something from me. I realized that I was becoming more and more sensitive and paranoid. Late at night, I often tossed and turned, and all sorts of horrible images surfaced in my mind. Isabella and another man hugging intimately, the two of them laughing and joking at a candlelight dinner, and even in the hotel room, and even in the rain. These images haunted me like a nightmare and made it impossible for me to sleep at night, and I lost all my appetites. I began to ask myself, is my love for Isabella not enough? What had I done wrong to make her heart drift away? Whenever I expressed these concerns, Isabella would pacify me with sweet words, saying that I was the only man in her heart. But these words could no longer dispel the darkness in my heart. That weekend's family gathering was the turning point in the breakup of my marriage, and I didn't take my eyes off Isabella for a second. Throughout the party, I didn't take my eyes off Isabella for a single moment, and I was keenly aware of her antics. Frequent checking of her cell phone, furtive departures from the table alone, thoughtful expressions, and flickering eyes. All these signs deepened my suspicions. When Isabella excused herself to go to the restroom again, I could not hold back and followed her. I saw her hiding on the balcony and talking on the phone. Her tone was intimate and full of tenderness. At that moment, my heart completely sank. I rushed forward and grabbed Isabella's cell phone. When I saw the name on the screen, I felt like the sky was spinning. Edwin, The important client Isabella was talking about was already so close to her. Isabella stammered and stammered in the face of my aggressive questioning. I pressed and pressed until she could no longer defend herself, broke down and cried, and confessed to me that she had an illicit relationship with Edwin. I felt sick to my stomach, as if someone had slapped me in the face. So, our marriage vows were so worthless in her eyes. I suddenly turned around and left without looking back, leaving the crying woman behind. I returned to the table without expression, mechanically raised my glass, smiled at the guests and pretended that nothing had happened. But only I knew that inside I was in a state of shock and fury. When the party was over and the guests had left, I locked myself in my study and sat alone in the darkness until dawn. Isabella's words replaying in my mind, the lies and betrayals, like sharp knives, over and over again, lashing my heart. I don't understand why Isabella is doing this to me. Doesn't our marriage, our vows, mean anything to her? Is it possible that the 10 years of our relationship has been discarded by her so easily? Every question makes me feel desperate and cold. It was a sleepless night. As the first rays of morning light filtered through the curtains, I rose wearily to face a brand new day. I knew that between Isabella and me, there was no going back. Trust and loyalty, the cornerstones of love, had been destroyed by her own hand. Our marriage, from now on, can only come to an end. Instead of going to work, I locked myself in my study, trying to make sense of things and make a decision. I called a lawyer to inquire about a divorce. The lawyer's calm voice gave me a little bit of comfort. I knew that no matter how much hardship lay ahead, I had to face it with courage. When Isabella saw me, she was hesitant to speak, her eyes full of apologies and pleas. But I didn't give her a chance to speak. I calmly told her that I had decided to get a divorce and that our marriage had come to an end. Isabella sobbed instantly and fell on her knees in front of me, begging for my forgiveness. But my decision had been made and would not be changed. The damage of betrayal is irreparable. Between us, there is no possibility. That night, I slept in the guest room, listening to Isabella's cries next door. My heart, too, was dripping blood. But I knew that this was the pain I had to bear. Only after this could I truly let go and start again. I found a divorce lawyer and consulted him about the legal procedures. The lawyer told me that first I needed to prepare a divorce agreement, which should set out in detail the division of property and child custody arrangements. He advised me to try to get fair and reasonable terms to avoid future disputes and litigation. With the help of a lawyer, I drafted this divorce agreement. With regard to the division of property, I made the following points. First of all, our joint property, including the villa where we live now and the apartment in the center of the city, will be divided equally between the two of us. We will hire a professional real estate appraiser to value both properties and then use that as the basis for an equitable division. Secondly, our respective financial assets, such as bank deposits and stock investments, will be owned by each of us. We will provide each other with detailed financial reports to ensure that the division is transparent and fair. Thirdly, the two automobiles we bought together, one for me and one for Isabella, and as for the other joint property, such as furniture, electrical appliances, etc., we will appraise them and divide the value equally. Finally, we also need to consider the issue of debt. We will sort out any debts incurred during the marriage, such as mortgages, car loans, etc., and share the burden of repayment equitably in accordance with their respective incomes and capacity to incur debt. The issue of child custody is the most difficult and heartbreaking for me. Henry and Monica are still young and need the love and attention of both parents. I don't want them to be hurt by Isabella and I's divorce. After much deliberation, I have come up with the following proposal. Isabella and I will share legal custody of our child, which means we will make major decisions about the child's education, healthcare, and life together. However, considering that Monica was still in kindergarten and needed her mother's care, I suggested that Monica stay with Isabella on weekdays and I could pick her up on weekends for some father-daughter time. As for Henry, I suggested that he could alternate living with Isabella and me, spending an equal amount of time each week at both of our homes. In this way, he would not lose the love of either of us and would be able to adjust to his new life in a divorced family. During holidays and summer and winter vacations, Isabella and I will take turns scheduling the children's activities to ensure that they are able to spend enough time with both parents. We will share the costs of the children's education and medical expenses according to our respective financial capabilities. We will establish a joint education fund for the children to ensure that they receive a good education and have a bright future. When I told Isabella about the programs, she sobbed uncontrollably. She said she would accept this arrangement for the sake of the children. We agreed that we would try to control our emotions in front of the children and not let them see our arguments and conflicts. Together, we would guide the children through this difficult adjustment period in a mature and rational manner. Over the next few days, we communicated with our legal team to refine every detail of the agreement. We verified the appraisal reports of the properties and vehicles and determined the division plan. We sorted out our financial assets and liabilities and reached a consensus on fair sharing. We discussed the children's living arrangements in detail and formulated a complete joint custody plan. Although the process was full of controversy and negotiation, we finally reached an agreement based on reason. I know that this divorce agreement is the best protection we can give each other and our children. It's cold, but it represents a responsible approach to our future. Finally, the final version of the agreement was finalized. I took a pen and solemnly signed my name on the document, and Isabella signed her part as well. Thus, in the eyes of the law, our marriage came to an end. From then on, we were officially ex-husband and wife and began our separate journeys in life. Closing the folder, I felt a strange sense of relief in my heart. Despite the uncertainty of the future, despite the pain, at least we had ended the unhappy marriage in a decent and rational way. We didn't let personal grudges get in the way of our children's interests, and we did our best to hold them up in the midst of the turmoil. After the divorce papers were signed, I thought that this unfortunate marriage had come to an end. Isabella and I would start a new life together. However, deep down, I couldn't really calm down. Whenever I think of Isabella's betrayal and that man Edwin, I feel a nameless fire burning in my chest. I know that Edwin is the real culprit in this marital tragedy. If he hadn't intervened, if he hadn't seduced me, maybe Isabella and I wouldn't have gotten to this point. The thought that he could have gone on with his life unscathed and continue to terrorize other families was a source of great anger and resentment. A thought gradually took shape in my mind. I will make Edwin taste the bitter fruit of betrayal, and I will make him pay for it. I knew that Edwin had a wife, Maria, and in a photograph I happened to see, she was a gentle, beautiful woman. I decided that I would find Maria and tell her the truth. I wanted her to know what a hypocrite and a liar her husband was. I found Maria's contact information through the divorce proceedings. On a weekend afternoon, I summoned up the courage to dial her number. When I told her who I was and that I had important information to tell her about her husband, she seemed very surprised and upset. We met at a quiet cafe. When Maria walked in, I recognized her immediately. She looked even more depressed and haggard than in her photos and seemed to have lost her faith in life. I told Maria about Edwin and Isabella in detail. I showed her intimate photos of them and some ambiguous text messages. Maria's face turned white and tears fell from the corners of her eyes. As it turned out, she had long been skeptical of Edwin's loyalty. She had questioned Edwin countless times, but each time he'd gotten away with a lot of clever talk. Now, after learning the truth from me, she was convinced that she had been living a lie for years. Maria thanked me for showing her the true nature of her husband. She told me that she had decided to divorce Edwin and kick him out of the house. She couldn't stand the thought of her husband destroying someone else's family. She wanted to make a clean break in her life. I comforted Maria and told her to be strong in the future. I told her that as a person who has been there before, I know how deep the hurt of betrayal is, but I believe that as long as we are brave enough to look forward, we will someday get out of the darkness and find our own happiness. Thus, Edwin's wife, whom he had been cheating on for years, finally found out his true colors. At Maria's insistence, Edwin had to move out of their house. As far as I know, Maria filed a divorce petition in court and asked for most of the joint property. She said Edwin owed her, and she wanted her dignity back. Edwin's life was turned upside down. Not only did he lose his wife and family, but his reputation at work and in social circles began to suffer. It turned out that some of Edwin's colleagues, who also knew Isabella, started spreading rumors in the company after they overheard about Edwin and Isabella. Together with Maria's filing for divorce, Edwin has become a real, heartless man and third party in the eyes of his colleagues. Gradually, people began to look at Edwin in a different way, and some people who already disliked him even took advantage of the situation to talk about him behind his back, and Edwin's popularity in the company went down the drain. There were even rumors that the company's top management had begun to discuss whether to fire him. Edwin's social life, too, has been traumatized. He used to be a friend and a frequent partygoer, but now many of his friends have cut ties with him after learning of his behavior, and no one wants to be around an unfaithful man. No one wanted to be associated with an unfaithful man, and Edwin became increasingly lonely and unpopular. Edwin's career and relationships began to fall apart. Everything he had built up over the years was destroyed in this incestuous affair. He finally got a taste of what it means to break up another man's family. I didn't feel any pleasure when I heard about it from someone else. I just felt that Edwin had it coming to him. He'd been so high and mighty, and now he'd gotten what he deserved. In retrospect, my revenge on Edwin did not make me happy. It didn't ease my pain, and it didn't save my marriage. But at least I didn't let a hypocrite get away with it. I made him pay, and I gave him a taste of what it's like to be wrong. Life after the divorce was a difficult adjustment period for me. Suddenly, I was no longer a husband, no longer part of a complete family. I had to learn how to redefine my role and meaning in this broken world. The first few weeks were the worst. Every morning I woke up to an empty bed beside me and felt a dull ache. The traces Isabella had left behind were a constant reminder of what a relationship I had lost. But I can't dwell on my grief forever. I have children to take care of and a career to build. I have to pick myself up and find my way again. I started to devote myself to my work. I took over several important projects in the company and often worked late into the night. My tired body made me forget the pain in my heart for a while. I felt that the only way out of my failed marriage was to keep moving forward. At the same time, I tried to spend as much time as possible with my children. The divorce was no less devastating for them than it was for me. It takes time for them to adjust to a new life with separated parents, and I am their most important support. I started to learn to be a good single father. I picked them up and dropped them off at school, tutored them in their homework, and played with them on weekends. I hope that my companionship and love can make up for the loss of their mother. I want them to know that their father's love will never change. Gradually, I began to recover from my heavy workload and childcare responsibilities. I re-examined our marriage and reflected on the reasons behind this failure. I realized that the problems between Isabella and I had accumulated over years of estrangement. We were the ones who killed the relationship. From what I understand, Isabella went through a traumatic time after her divorce. She is reflecting, repenting, and trying to understand her behavior. This failed marriage may serve as a lesson for her to be faithful and cherished in her future relationships. During these months of solitude, I slowly found inner peace. I was no longer angry with Isabella or pessimistic about my marriage. I began to believe that perhaps this misfortune was a chance for me to grow. Time passes unnoticed, and the pain of divorce fades with each passing day. During the time Isabella and I were apart, we each focused on our own lives, trying to find new meaning and direction. I have devoted myself to my work and have achieved some small successes in my career. At the same time, I have done my best to be a good father to my children and to keep them healthy and happy. Gradually, I began to get used to the absence of Isabella. I no longer woke up in the middle of the night and subconsciously felt the empty bed beside me. I no longer took the kids to Isabella's place every weekend and spent an awkward and silent afternoon. Life, it seemed, was slowly returning to normal in the midst of the trauma of divorce. Just when I thought I had turned the last page of my story with Isabella, fate, once again, played a joke on me. It was New Year's Eve and I was invited to a mutual friends party. In the midst of all the music and mingling, I suddenly saw a familiar figure. It was Isabella, my long-separated ex-wife. Her appearance does not seem to have changed much, but her temperament has changed subtly. Once upon a time, Isabella, always with a kind of graceful and noble atmosphere, no matter what occasion, is the focus of the crowd. But now she is more calm and introverted. She stood quietly in the corner, seems to be avoiding something, but also seems to be looking for something. Our eyes met in the crowd. In that moment, time seemed to freeze. Although we had been separated for so long, that familiar feeling had never changed. I saw a hint of surprise, a hint of nostalgia, and a hint of indescribable feelings in her eyes. As if by magic, I walked towards her. We exchanged pleasantries and chatted about our respective situations. I was surprised to find that this conversation was surprisingly natural and smooth. Once awkward and mustache, seems to be in the precipitation of time, slowly dissolved. We talked about the children, and Isabella told me that she visits Henry and Monica every weekend to spend time with them. She said that she was overwhelmed by how much the children had grown and changed. She also thanked me for all the love and care I had given them during this time. We also talked about our lives, and Isabella said that in the time since her divorce, she has re-examined her life. She realized that she had made too many mistakes in her past marriage. She was too self-centered, too impulsive, and never really made an effort for her marriage and family. The divorce, she says, was a huge lesson for her. It has taught her to reflect and grow. Listening to Isabella's confession, my heart was flooded with a strange feeling. I suddenly realized that the woman standing in front of me was no longer the Isabella of the past. She had become more mature, wiser, and more sincere. The kind of pride and willfulness in her has been slowly polished off by years and experiences. We talked for a long time until the party was almost over. When we were saying goodbye, Isabella's eyes suddenly twinkled. She seemed to have something difficult to say to me. Eventually, she mustered up the courage to ask the question, "Lucas, do you think there's any chance we can start over? For the sake of the children, for our own sake, can we give each other another chance?" I was stunned, and for a moment I didn't know how to answer. The past between us, so many hurt and betrayal, really can be forgiven and forgotten? Can we really start over? I didn't give an immediate answer, but told Isabella that I needed time to think about it. We agreed to talk about it after the new year. Thus, I left the party with a heart full of confusion and contradiction. On the way home, my mind kept flashing back to the past. I remembered the time when Isabella and I met, the sweetness of our love, and the happiness of our marriage. Then I remembered her betrayal and the pain of our divorce. It was all like a movie, replaying in my mind. I know, I need to think about this. Rebuilding a family is not a simple task. It takes courage, wisdom, and unconditional love and tolerance. I'm not sure if I have the courage and strength to do that after all I've been through. But at the same time, I knew exactly what Isabella's offer would mean for both of us and for the children. How wonderful it would be if we could really get back together. If we could really give this broken family a new start. Over the next few days, I thought about it over and over again. I listed all the pros and cons and weighed all the possibilities. I also had in-depth discussions with a few of my closest friends to get their opinions and advice. In the end, I made a decision. On the first day of the new year, I asked Isabella out and solemnly told her my answer. I said that I was willing to try again with her. We've both made mistakes, we've both hurt each other, but that doesn't mean we can't be happy. As long as we are willing to change, as long as we are willing to work hard, I believe that we will be able to rebuild our family and regain our happiness. Isabella cried tears of joy when she heard my answer. She hugged me tightly and said thank you again and again. I knew that this hug carried so many emotions: gratitude, joy, regret, and endless love. Thus, at the beginning of the new year, Isabella and I decided to join hands again to face all the possibilities of life. We both know that the road ahead will be full of difficulties and challenges. But as long as we stay close to each other, as long as we love each other and tolerate each other forever, I believe that we will be able to move towards a better tomorrow together. Looking back on this journey, Isabella and I have been through so many trials and tribulations in the trauma of divorce. But it was these hardships that allowed us to really grow and taught us how to love and how to forgive. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.